Welcome to a review video. In this video we're just going to be talking about the ethics of belief. So this is the Clifford reading, and we can start with Clifford's two shipowner cases. So he presents these two cases. Shipowner 1. In this case there's a shipowner. He is about to send a ship on its voyage with many passengers, and he doubts whether this ship will be safe and make it to its destination safely. He's like, it's kind of old, it's a bit rickety, maybe you can tell it's getting old, and he's like, I'm really not sure if it's gonna make it, but he's like, you know what, it's made many journeys before, why would this be the one that it fails? So he overcomes these doubts and genuinely convinces himself that this ship is seaworthy. That's the belief in question. So, genuinely believes this ship is seaworthy. However, unfortunately, the ship sinks, everyone dies. He maybe seems a bit indirectly, or actually maybe directly, morally responsible for these people's deaths. His belief that the ship is seaworthy has unfortunately killed many people, and that seems quite bad. Face value at the very least. So your initial thought might be, well, why was this belief bad? Because it killed people, because it resulted in the death of many people. However, version 2 of the shipowner case is almost exactly the same. So it has these doubts, but eventually overcomes them. He is deliberating, and he might only lean towards the belief that the ship is seaworthy rather than the belief that it isn't, because it's more convenient for him. And that's true in both cases. It's like, it'd be a real drag to like cancel this thing. It'd be a big monetary investment to fix this ship. So you know what, I'm pretty sure this ship is seaworthy. Like, why would it fail this time? And the ship makes it. Everyone's fine. No one dies. Makes this voyage, maybe a few more, safely. And his belief, same belief, this ship is seaworthy, doesn't end up killing anyone. So the question is whether or not these ship owners are they have the same belief that the ship is seaworthy, whether they're both equally, the belief is equally morally irresponsible and morally bad. So yes, the shipowner 1 had bad consequences, shipowner 2 didn't. That was just out of luck. It just so happened that the winds were blowing slightly softer in the second case. So if we're evaluating whether or not a belief, it can be wrong to believe something, it shouldn't seem in any moral case that arbitrary factors such as getting lucky make a moral difference. So why would the luck that shipowner 2 experiences make a moral difference? So it seems like in both cases, the belief was morally bad and irresponsible, despite the fact that one had bad consequences and the other one didn't. And Clifford's analysis of why is because they're both socially significant beliefs based upon insufficient evidence. So both are socially significant. We define a socially significant belief as a belief that can affect the welfare of someone other than the believer. In both cases, it's pretty obvious how the belief is socially significant. The ship owner's belief, whether it's seaworthy or not, is going to affect who even boards the ship in the first place, and in the first case, whether or not those people die. So since you might say in both cases, both ship owners had a responsibility to hopefully prevent the deaths of the passengers if they could, and avoid those deaths if they could. And whether or not they held the belief that the ship is seaworthy has the power to decide whether someone lives or dies. So it's pretty obviously socially significant. And in both cases, they're based upon insufficient evidence. Remember how both the ship owners, they're thinking, I really don't know. Like, I've had quite a few indications that it's not seaworthy. And then, based on no further exploration, just kind of like convincing themselves, they both come to the conclusion that it is seaworthy. So it could really go either way, and then seeking no further evidence to actually, make that decision, such that, seeking no further evidence that would make that decision more obvious or more clear. They don't consult anything else. They're just like, upon insufficient evidence, they both believe the ship is seaworthy. So that's Clifford's analysis of what's going on in these two cases. And Clifford's rule, this is a categorical rule. It is always wrong anywhere for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. So we still have to argue for Clifford's rule. And this is in your notes. This is argument for Clifford's rule. It starts out with this premise. It is always wrong anywhere for anyone to believe anything socially significant upon insufficient evidence. This is a weaker claim than Clifford's rule. So this is Clifford's rule up here. And then the conclusion will be Clifford's rule. However, this is not just it's wrong to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. It's wrong to believe anything that's socially significant upon insufficient evidence. So it's a different claim, and again, slightly weaker. But it's easier to understand. So defense here is a diagnosis of the shipowner cases. So again, both had a socially significant belief, the belief of whether or not the ship was seaworthy. It was going to affect the lives, maybe end the lives of many people. That's pretty obvious. And again, both based on insufficient evidence. And both of them are equally morally bad because when presented with, because they both form a belief that will affect the welfare of others upon insufficient evidence. It's equally wrong. Both beliefs are equally bad. They're both socially significant, and they both have little evidence going for them. Clearly not enough evidence. The second premise is what's going to bridge this weaker version to the strong version, which is Clifford's rule. And that is every belief is socially significant. And in your notes, there are two short quotes from Clifford. If you just read the quotes and you maybe highlight or underline the key sections, you can see where he's kind of defending this premise. So first, all beliefs affect our belief-forming habits. That's not necessarily a term you need to, maybe not necessarily a term you need to know specifically, but it can be helpful to think of your belief-forming habits. So say, I believe Bigfoot is real. I believe Bigfoot exists, and I never tell anyone else. I think it doesn't affect anyone. However, it's kind of training me, or I'm, I guess, training myself to accept certain beliefs upon insufficient evidence. I have no evidence for the belief that Bigfoot exists. Nonetheless, I believe it anyway. So if I'm going to accept that one, then why not accept the belief that the Yeti exists, that Mothman exists, and so on and so on. So, and you can also think of it, I believe a term used, I can't remember if it's used in the reading, but the web of beliefs. So if your beliefs are kind of in this web, then one being weak and based on insufficient evidence, that one that's there is going to affect all other beliefs in the web, whether you think it's going to or not. So this may someday, as Clifford says, this may explode into overt action. So we may get a clear result of, because of this one belief I made on insufficient evidence, that prepared me to make another belief on insufficient evidence, and that one ended up directly hurting people, say. So it may someday explode into overt action that's very clearly morally bad, but we need not even say it does. The fact that it can is enough. It has the power to, and it will affect our web of beliefs and the overall quality of our web of beliefs, and it'll get us in the habit of forming beliefs upon insufficient evidence. So yeah, maybe it'll explode into something more clear one day, but you don't even need to go that far to say it's going to still affect your web of beliefs, so to speak. Again, you don't really need to know that term, but maybe it's helpful to think about. And the second part of this is all beliefs influence other people. So as the meme goes, we live in a society, and that's honestly a pretty good way to remember this. Apparently not everyone's too familiar with that meme, but you can look it up. Big in my day, I guess. So no man's belief is such a private matter that it concerns himself alone. Our beliefs and our ways of thinking influence those around us, and the thinking of those around us influences us. So even in tiny ways that seem insignificant, you are influencing other people. And again, maybe it's not super directly clear how those influences really affect the welfare of other people. You eventually get to a place where it's pretty easy to see how they at least could. So one example that comes to mind when I think of this is like, you might know someone like this, or a few people like this, who just kind of maybe think they're very smart, and maybe they form quite a few beliefs based on insufficient evidence. Maybe they make a few assumptions, and then they just like assert them like they're fact. So one example, I guess, could be there was a myth. There was a myth going around for a while. I'm not sure if any of you heard it, but a myth that your blood is blue until it is exposed to oxygen, and that's when it turns red. The truth is that blood is red. It's red when it's in your veins. It's not just the oxidization that makes it red. And I mean, when you think of it, I'm not exactly sure where this myth came from, but it's easy for me to imagine that it came from someone who was just kind of, looking at their veins and noticing their veins are blue and making the assumption, oh, well, if there's blood in my veins, then it must be the blood that's making my veins blue. That was the evidence that I was told when I was presented with that myth. They were like, well, why would your veins be blue if your blood's red? That doesn't make any sense. It must be the blood, the color of the blood that makes your veins blue. Therefore, your blood is blue when it's in your body. So you could just imagine one person is kind of making a faulty assumption, maybe innocently at a young age, just thinking like, oh yeah, that would make sense, but like not looking into it further, making this belief upon insufficient evidence, and then telling someone else, and someone else hears that, and they're pretty convinced. You're like, oh yeah, that does make sense. They don't look into it further. And then maybe eventually that's how, so many people in society ended up with the false belief that blood is actually blue. So it certainly could result in people around you thereby holding false beliefs, and maybe that will more clearly negatively impact them one day. You could imagine someone hearing that myth and then getting curious and cutting themselves to see to maybe see if that's true. That's a bit of a gruesome example, I guess, and remember, you don't even need to take it to that case to know that it still affects other people, and it has the potential to affect the welfare of other people. So maybe it'll become overt, but again, you don't even need to take it there. You can already see how it affects your web of beliefs and your belief-forming habits, which can be bad for you. And it can also affect the people around you and maybe affect their welfare too. So that is that is short review on Clifford's rule and the ethics of belief. The rest of this unit doesn't concern ethics of belief, but yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Thank you for watching.